Hello, everybody. Good morning, and welcome back to the latest edition of the Morning Bulletin here on the Blood Red channel. I'm your host, Edward Kay. Joining me this morning is Dave Comerford, and we're going to start because we did speak on the morning stream about Szoboszlai, but I've not actually spoken to Dave about Szoboszlai yet. So just wanted to get your thoughts on the move that was obviously completed over the weekend, Dave.
Really exciting move. A lot of money, obviously the most Liverpool have ever paid for a midfielder. But I think if Szoboszlai can be finally the Liverpool midfielder who sort of is given the license to produce and can produce big numbers of goals and assists from that kind of right-sided number 8 position, then I think Liverpool are basically, going to justify that price tag. And the midfield rebuild generally, I suppose, with Szoboszlai and McAllister in those two advanced roles, it's off to a fantastic start. Hopefully there's one more player to come in, but certainly very exciting so far. And from everything you see with Szoboszlai, it looks like he ticks all of the most important boxes for a player in this position in this Liverpool system.
Yeah, as you say, hopefully one more player to come in. Obviously, they've added goals to the midfield with Szoboszlai and McAllister, but people obviously clamouring for maybe some Fabinho cover as well. Romeo Lavia, one of the names that's been linked most recently. That's who we're going to speak about next, obviously. Arsenal apparently rivaling Liverpool for his signatures, but rated at about £50 million. That's supposed to be what Southampton are holding out for. Obviously, Arsenal have just got Declan Rice in for 105 million, who's obviously slightly more defensive midfielder. I'm not sure what role Mikel Arteta's got planned for him, but I mean, obviously Arsenal have got Champions League football. They were the closest to pushing Manchester City for the title last year. Who do you think's going to have more pull in terms of Mikel Arteta, Jurgen Klopp? We've already seen that Jurgen Klopp's had more pull than Eddie Howe and Newcastle United, despite them having Champions League football, because Szoboszlai, that they were in for him as well, and he basically said, "No, I want to go and work with Jurgen Klopp." So, who do you think's sort of in the more advantageous position as regards to that?
I think this is tricky because obviously Lavia has come from Manchester City. I mean, obviously quite a young player, so I'm not sure whether he would have had any contact with Arteta. He might have done. That's probably a factor that comes into it as well. I think there's a relationship there between Arsenal and the players' agents as well. I think they also represent Saka and Nketiah, and maybe that's one of those things that we don't think about too much as fans, but that plays a part. Obviously, they're the people kind of brokering the deal, etc. So I think those are maybe a couple of important factors. I think the Rice deal is quite important in the sense that it looks like Arsenal's midfield next season is going to be Rice as kind of the number 6. Havertz is apparently going to be used as a number 8, and then they've got Odegaard in the other position in there. So there's not really an avenue to start. I think there is a kind of more immediate starting opportunity at Liverpool, and probably a longer term one too. You mentioned Fabinho there. He's getting on a little bit now. So based on his performances last season too, it might not be long before the time comes for him to step out the side, and maybe that's when Lavia comes into it. Whereas if you're looking at Arsenal, they've got Declan Rice. I mean, he's only in his mid-20s, isn't he? So it's going to be a very long wait if he gets into the team at all at the Emirates. So I think if he wants playing time and if he wants kind of that path, then Liverpool's a better option. Obviously, no Champions League football is a factor, but I think he's 19. I don't think he needs to worry about it too much, especially, just coming from Southampton. So I think Liverpool, if they seriously go for him, I don't necessarily see Arsenal having an advantage, put it that way. It's going to come down to who I suppose the player just kind of relates to it and clicks with more. I think it could be what decides if both teams go for it. But I guess from the Liverpool standpoint, you think if they want this player, go for him now, while Arsenal are still locked in these final talks over Declan Rice, because it looks like that one's pretty much going to get done. But, still maybe some details to sort out. So from the outside looking in, you think that's an opportunity to steal a march, really, and get something done quite quickly before Arsenal can maybe turn their full attentions to it.
Yeah, I think Lavia and the other obvious name being linked at the moment, I mean, Manu Kone would have been one before, but obviously his injury at the under-21 championships probably means he's slipped slightly down the pecking order on the midfield shortlist. But it's probably Lavia and Thuram being the two most talked about now. Slightly different profiles, but both definitely more defensive-minded than a McAllister or a Szoboszlai. I mean, when you sort of compare the two and look at who you think you'd rather Liverpool get in, obviously, I mean, this seems like a funny thing to mention, really, but with Southampton holding out for 50 million, Man City are due 20% of that. So if we pay 50 million for Lavia, I don't much like the idea of giving them 10 million pounds, to be honest with you. So I think I'd still sort of be favouring Thuram, but where do you come down on that one?
I take your point about Man City. I mean, what I would say on that is Arsenal gave them about, what was it, 85, 90 million last year for a couple of players. And at Chelsea, obviously, for Sterling as well. So it wouldn't be certainly out the ordinary from that standpoint, I suppose. In terms of those two players, I think I'd probably lean towards Lavia just because from everything I've sort of read about Thuram, he wouldn't necessarily be that kind of number 6 fit. And it's what you have to consider Liverpool's midfielders, because they've got Trent Alexander-Arnold nominally in that double pivot. They do need that kind of more sort of fixed defensive presence. I think someone like Fabinho, because while Trent is going to start from those deep positions, we saw last season how much kind of license he has to like basically push forward into more advanced areas. And then obviously Liverpool need the cover behind within the midfield. So I think Lavia is probably a better fit from that standpoint. Thuram would maybe be someone who more competes with Szoboszlai potentially, or McAllister perhaps on the other side. So I would go for Lavia, but I also have a concern about that one in the sense of he's only, I think, a year older than Bajcetic. He's got more experience. He's maybe a little bit further down the line in his development, but it strikes me as a little bit strange to bring in another kind of elite young defensive midfielder when you've already kind of got one who was really impressive last season. And it just seems like you're creating a situation where it's going to come to a head. You're going to lose one of them at some stage, and that's assuming that Trent, stays in that kind of double pivot role, and you can only really fit one of them into the side. And maybe I'm getting too far ahead of myself there, but this is just based on kind of the potential that both players have showed. I mean, before the window, I looked at it and I thought, if we are to get a defensive midfielder because of how good Bajcetic has been, then maybe it is worth getting someone who is like, maybe 26, for example, and then Bajcetic maybe does still see a bit of a timeline there. But if you're getting someone who's only a year older and is ideally going to be a starter for the best part of a decade, then what does he do? And yeah, just I guess from that standpoint, and Bajcetic not necessarily being the best fit further forward in this system, it confuses me a little bit. But certainly I'd still be excited about the signing, and I'm willing to see how it plays out, how everyone fits together.
Yeah, I think if they did get Lavia in, another thing would be you'd probably still expect on that first game against Chelsea away, you'd probably still expect to see Fabinho starting, wouldn't you? And I think a lot of people maybe aren't wanting to see that. I think I'm open to it. I think if it was Fabinho and Henderson starting, I think you might get a lot more complaints, especially on Twitter. But we'll move on now to a bit of Steven Gerrard news. Obviously, in recent weeks, there's been a lot of speculation that he was going to make the move to management over in the Saudi Pro League. It looked like it was pretty much done a couple of weeks ago. Then it all seemed scuppered. There was rumours he hadn't signed and then left. But now confirmed he's going to go and manage in the Saudi Pro League at Al Ettifaq. I hope I'm saying that right. I mean, a lot of people are going there at the moment, aren't they, David? There's silly money being thrown around. So can you sort of understand it for that perspective, or is there a bit of disappointment in there that he's sort of going to a league where he's not really going to be testing himself against the best managerially?
I'd say disappointment, to be honest. Strictly looking at this from the sporting perspective, because obviously, it's a lot more multifaceted than that, I suppose, when someone chooses to manage in the Saudi Pro League. I think he's not gone to one of the clubs that's received the investment from the PIF. So essentially what he's banking on is the league to be elevated as a whole, just based on kind of those 4 clubs getting the investments. And I suppose there will be a bit of a trickle down effect in the league with sort of the better players coming in. But it just feels a little bit like, I mean, you look at the squad that he's got at his disposal. I had a quick look at it before we came on this morning, and it's really as short of like recognisable names as Robin Quaison, who I think was a decent Bundesliga striker for a while. Nunes, who I think used to play for Napoli. So, I mean, there's a couple of attackers in there, but the rest of it, he's working with players who are going to be quite limited and are going to be kind of from the sort of previous generation of the league before all the investments. And also, the club was in the second tier as recently as 2016. They've not won I think they've won the league twice, and it was in the 1980s. So it's a big challenge. I think they were sort of mid-table last season. So for Gerrard's like progression point of view, I don't fully get it, because he's not necessarily going to be able to compete to win the league. And are people going to take notice if Gerrard's, delivering, sixth place in the Saudi Pro League? I mean, maybe he's fine because he's got his own name recognition already, and people are naturally going to be following what he's doing, not least Liverpool fans, obviously. But it just seems a little bit of a strange career move. I think if he was going to go to, I mean, I think Nuno is managing, I can't remember which club it is exactly, but I think he's managing one of the teams at the top. You can see how he might, be able to use that to his advantage a bit more if he does want to get a return to Europe out of it. Gerrard, I think the path is a little bit less obvious, but we'll see how he does anyway. I mean, the way things ended at Aston Villa was really toxic, so I'm not necessarily completely surprised that he's chosen to maybe move a little bit out of the limelight for this one.
Yeah, I think I can sort of understand it from the perspective of it. We're talking about generational wealth going over and earning money out there, and I'd sort of resign myself to the fact he's never going to be good enough to be Liverpool manager. And I think my worst nightmare was him getting the job, not being good enough, and sort of I don't think he could taint his legacy, but it would just be. It'd just be a really unnecessary end to what he's done for the club. And I mean, personally, I'd be happy to see him do 3 years in Saudi, make all the money he wants, then come back and just do punditry, because, like I say, I just didn't want to see him get the Liverpool job and struggle, really. What do you think I mean, are you sort of given up on that idea as well?
Yeah, I think so. I think when he was at Rangers and he was doing really well, obviously they had that unbeaten season. You thought, maybe there was something in it in terms of future Liverpool opportunity. But Aston Villa, he looked a bit out of his depth, to be honest. And it was one of them where he was just basically getting found out in terms of, I don't think he had like as detailed a philosophy at all as the managers. And I think that's a problem with moving to the Saudi Pro League, is that he's not going to be coming up against the best coaches in the world every week, as you do in the Premier League. I mean, I know they've got an increasing amount of attraction for sort of big names, but still, that I suppose is going to be where he kind of can really distinguish himself and where he's going to learn the most, even if there is a bit of pain in there. So I think in terms of his own progress and his prospects, I mean, even if it's not going to be Liverpool, he will want a shot at some kind of top job, maybe even the England job at some stage or something like that. I think I don't necessarily see how this role is going to enhance those opportunities, but it's also so early in the Saudi project. I mean, by the end of this transfer window, by the start of next year, by the end of the transfer window next year, I mean, things are probably going to look so different, the amount of money that's being poured in. So maybe we're in a different position. Maybe his club receives investment and it's a bit of a game changer. But yeah, we'll see what happens with it. But initial reaction would definitely be kind of a bit underwhelmed from Gerrard's perspective.
Yeah, well, we'll see how it goes from out there and where he ends up next. If he does get a move back to Europe, obviously Liverpool fans will be eager to follow wherever he does go. But that is all we've got time for here on the Morning Bulletin today. So thanks to Dave for joining me, and we'll catch you next time.